Welcome to the second part of Turf Business Question Time here from the Jafar Hall at Eton College. Staying on this theme, Roy Rigby, who heads up the team at Man City, he got his guys together and kind of got some feedback from them. One of the things that he wanted me to point out is that employers need to recognise teams for what they do and understand the difficulties with high usages and weather conditions. And I think that's kind of something that we've all accepted. The other one that he also mentioned on this topic is the need for promotion within schools and colleges, and wider if possible, with both rural and in city colleges. Does the panel have any suggestions on this? Well, I know Dougie probably does, so shall we start with you, Dougie?
I think the hardest thing is trying to get into the school and the college is so difficult. We've got a school next to our training ground. We've employed Mitchell, so he came to me at 16. He's now 21, and he's been promoted to my head groundsman at a non-league football club that we look after, Dagenham and Redbridge, where our women's team play. So there is a success rate. We've continued speaking to the school on a regular basis. We try and get in, do a presentation, try and explain what the industry is. The harder point now is that kids are stuck in education until they're 18, rightly so, because the key skills gap was becoming too large. But I think it starts and stops with the careers advisors in the school. And I've had long conversations with both Jeff and Jason on this, that if we could open, the careers advisor could open the letter and it suddenly got all the governing bodies in sport round, that letter would get more attention than one that comes in with GMA written on it, BEGA written on it, yeah, because the schools don't understand it. We've done a poll at West Ham, so a study just to see how many impressionable age group potential students could be from the level of jobs that we put out across the business, from chefs, office workers, media, groundsmanship. And again, it's so difficult to try and employ somebody that's a fan but can distance himself enough from being around the team to somebody that can physically work. And that becomes a different problem. There's new directive with the Premier League that, and in football, so any job that comes up needs to be advertised in a central database, and sent round everyone in the league. Lee was saying earlier that the hospitality sector, for some reason, whenever you put a job advert out, they're the ones that tend to apply back first. So for me, it's the difficulty in physically getting into the schools and getting the correct people round the table to have a discussion. Because I just don't think enough people understand that we do a job, even though we've got stadiums with 50, 60,000 people. The Grand Prix was on last week, 150,000 people a day. The extra events that go on at Twickenham that people don't know about because they only see Six Nations in the autumn internationals. And right now, there's no outside cricket, really, tennis. How many questions are getting asked? Who does what at Wimbledon right now? Yet we're 2 games away from the final.
Jeff, are you happy to come back on this? Because I know you ran an initiative called Schools into Stadiums. So you've probably got some experience of this that you can share with us, yeah?
From our perspective, what I think we've identified is this industry is quite invisible in the career path that you try and set out. So, Jason, I'm going to hand the mic to him in a minute because he'll explain it better. But we're putting a framework together for the industry which will map out where you can sit within that industry. So whether that's your skills, your qualifications, your experience, alongside the type of venue, that will make it a lot more tangible. And then when we go back into the various sports that we come across, and we come across them at all levels, and again, I'll let Jason pick up on this. I think one of the problems we've got on our side, different to golf, is we have to go in and talk to all the different sports, who all start at a slightly different starting point in their attitude and outlook to this profession and this industry. So we're having a lot of conversations to try and get them to a start point to understand it in the first place, and we've done a lot of that over the years. Once you can get them there, then you can start moving them forwards. In the school sector, it's really interesting because we've been going to the Bursars Conference for quite a few years now and trying to influence that way. And I still don't think that the Bursars quite get you guys en masse. So I still think there's a communication issue between, you know, the decision makers on budgets in schools and you as a profession. And we see really varying degrees of understanding when it comes to that. So there's a massive still communication job to be done on that. But I'll just hand over to Jason and he can talk about the framework we're talking about.
Yeah, cheers, Jeff. And you're quite right. It's getting recognised and appreciated for the roles that we do. So the work that Jeff talks about is called the Grounds Management Framework, which is 90% complete. It creates that clear pathway from school leaver or education leaver right to the elite stadiums that many of the people in this room are working at the minute. So that's almost ready for release. Also, interacting with the national governing bodies, as Jeff said, they've played a full part in this grounds management framework, which is quite encouraging to see, because they see that there's a shortage. I think 3,000, we've just done a recent survey, over 3,000 professionals are going to leave the industry in the next 4 years. So that's another stat for you. So there is a crisis on our hands. Also, we're trying to get the role and the industry recognised and the job roles recognised at the right levels. So there's an organisation called CIMSPA, Chartered Institute for Sports Management Physical Activity. So basically that's the umbrella over all the roles and professions within sport. So we're already down that road with CIMSPA to get this industry and these job roles recognised alongside coaches and other roles that are clearly recognised in sport. So one of the dreams I've had and the organisation have had is that when you're filling an application form and you have the drop down and it says what career, you don't see sports turf operative, you don't see grounds managers, but that will then that will put us in that same line and that same position. So there's lots and lots of work going on behind the scenes. We've also recently just had our strategy signed off at board level, which includes workforce industry development as well. So there's going to be a big push and a big investment in that from the GMA going forward. And I know we've got a meeting with Bigger in the next few weeks as well to see how we can work together as an industry to be able to push all in the right direction across all areas.
Guys, have you got thoughts on that?
Yeah, so you've mentioned the framework and school leavers. How will school leavers find that information?
We're going to make sure that we communicate this both with sports and the industry. So it'll be a big communication process to make sure that all the industry gets it, all the relevant NGBs, all the relevant sectors get this. So there's a massive communication drive process that we will go through to make sure that everybody gets to understand and be aware of it.
Because the biggest thing I find is that school leavers now don't know where to find the information. Land-based colleges have slowly diminished and don't do practical. They're very much out on the front and, you know, doing the online stuff. And I know MySco do quite a lot, so not necessarily aimed at MySco, but BCA down the road, Merist Wood, absolutely trying to get information out of them is like getting blood out of a stone. It's just not going to happen. And I find that because there's not the full-time college course, and whether we agree with what the course does or what, to give someone the basis, now if you're a leaver, you've either got to get an apprenticeship, do an online course, or do it on the job effectively. So I was lucky enough to do a full-time college course, 3.5 days a week, not really full-time, but it was for a year. I got a qualification at the end of it, and I got work experience and gone from there. But I find if you're a 16-year-old now, got to stay on for 2 years, if you've got to do a course and you see plumbing full-time, electrician full-time, carpentry full-time, which are all needed, grounds and ship, sports turf doesn't seem as a need, so therefore it gets dropped as a full-time course. And I just find that there's people out there, by not at least offering it, I know you've got to have probably 10 or 15 because the accountants will say you can't do the course, it's not bringing money in. I just find that we've got to find another way to try and get them 10 or 15 people in at a land-based college on a full-time course, or even now with the world of Zoom, we're running it online. but getting these guys and girls, experience on the job. So they might be in an online course, it might be for a year, but they could go and get work experience at Eton because they're in the Windsor area. They could go to Reading, down the road for 3 months, Eton for 3 months, maybe a golf course, and a different way of trying to get people in and out. Because at the moment, I just think if you're a 16-year-old and you don't know what you're going to do, we're missing that section. And they're the people we need to get hold of.
I fully agree with you, Lee. And it's interesting you said about a 3-month position, because we looked at that several years ago. Darren Baldwin tried to set up a London Academy. So basically you'd go and work 6 months at Tottenham, for example, and then 6 months at Wimbledon, the Grove, and it was discussed, got fairly far down the line, and I believe they were in with Capel Manor. I was in one of the meetings with that, and it just never finally got over the line. And that's a multitude of things between health and safety, costs, cost of living, but there is potential just to try and find the niche of what that person wants to do, wants to specialise in. But there is a big hole in that market, because a 15-year-old is not good at school, then just becomes a mechanic. But then that mechanic could become a mechanic in Sports Star for one of the companies that we all use.
I found here, moving here, two of my guys here today, they would say, said the same, don't feel that people upstairs understand what we do and how we do it. And there probably is some of that with definitely the teacher community that do it. But I think I've worked hard with the Bursa last year trying to get to understand that, if we're not trying to recruit in this world, not trying to change how we do things, then we are going to be in a tough position. And I agree with Jeff that there is some Bursas that don't have a clue what we're doing, just see us as grass cutters and things like that. But in its own right is a sector though where we have to produce lots of different things. So there's a balance, again, in between what we're trying to do. But I think a school like this could get on something like that to try and I think if more schools did that, then we're trying to produce the next sort of people coming through.
Martin, just to say, from our perspective, all these discussions we've had many times, internally and publicly. I think there's two ways. I've been in some of these forums, and I think you've got informal routes that you've got to use. So innovation is not a bad thing. So if you as a group want to become proactive, that's a good thing. Then there's more formal routes. So for us, we will go and attack, say, the education aspect of government. So we're going to knock on the door and raise the profile of the profession. And the way to do that is to give case studies, evidence, and data to them, because they breed off that. But right now, if I knocked on the door today, I think I'm probably going to find Sam Allardyce. He's going to be the next Prime Minister in a minute. But there's no education department, and actually getting that consistency of approach has been quite difficult. We've found when we're trying to engage with certain people in those sorts of arenas at the moment. I mean, I know Jim has got through golf. There's a all-party parliamentary golf group. Jim, probably not quite the right title. There isn't one for sport, so my chairman and myself, we're talking about forming one for sports turf management. I mean, there are a lot of them, but you have to get an MP interested first of all and sponsor it to get it set up. It's probably easy to do, to be honest. Then there's quite a lot of admin behind that. But we've thought about it because we don't feel at our level we've got as far as we want to get. So, like I say, I think we'll keep doing what you'd expect us to do, knock down the formal doors. We'll come up with innovative stuff. We mentioned Schools into Stadium, which came from young ground staff. It was their initiative. They set that up, and it was a great programme until lockdown happened. But I know that they want to resurrect that now. The opportunity's back there. But I do think it's a mix of things. There's no real silver bullet, and it's going to take a long time. But all we can do is raise awareness.
We've got another question from the other side of the room there. If we can just move the mic across, please.
I think there's quite a few of you have alluded to it already, but I think that is one of the other problems is that even if we get young people coming into the industry, a lot of the industry have made cutbacks, particularly on staff, where they don't have the ability to train the youngsters up. And I think if you could get some kind of modern apprenticeship scheme where you attract young people in and you've then got the staff to train them. So I appreciate that some places do have budget for training, but a lot of your everyday golf clubs and football clubs down the lower end just haven't got the facilities to actually train anybody up, and that's another restriction to getting people to come in. They come in and there's no real clear path either, so if you could either get some kind of apprenticeship scheme through the government that's subsidised, then that would maybe create a pathway as well.
Before we move that one on, I'll come over to you in a second. We've got a poll, I think, that we could put up on training budgets and what people's training budgets are currently, whether they've been affected, and we're using COVID as being normal times, pre-COVID as being normal times, and now as the comparison. So if you can go to your poll section on the app, please. So what is the level of your training budget now compared to pre-COVID? Higher, lower, the same, don't know, we don't have a training budget. Okay, so that's pretty much looking like most of the same. Some are higher, which is interesting. We don't have a training budget is even more interesting, and don't know, but nobody is lower. Okay. Anybody there want to comment on?
Yeah, I mean, we have a training budget which we use, and if I overspend it, I overspend it because I need to get staff trained at the end of the day. And the apprenticeship route, we have tried and unfortunately been unsuccessful with it. We've had the people you want to employ can't fill the paperwork in before they start, so you have to let them go. So I'd much rather call it as a trainee grounds person, to be honest, or gardener, or whoever we're looking for at the time. Just because I get slightly frustrated with the apprentice because after 2 years you're probably letting them go, and then you get another one. You spend all that time after 2 years training them up. I'd rather say to them, it's a trainee grounds person. This is where you're going to start. This is your progress. We'll get you on a training course. Make sure after 6 months to make sure they're happy with the job, training, and progress them that way. And we want staff to progress and develop. But, I just think it depends where you are. I still get it in my head and I still can't get over it. I just still think we're not offering more for the post-16 students that enough to try and attract them in. That's the biggest area, I think.
Can I bring Lee from MISCO in here? Because I'm sure you've got some comments to make on that, given your organisation's role.
I'll just start with apprenticeships, perhaps. This year, certainly as a college, record numbers, both in sports turf and in greenkeeping. I'm trying to think of the actual numbers. We've probably signed up around about 90 apprentices within sports turf operative this year, and probably about 200-ish greenkeeping. And those range from football clubs in London to football clubs up north, golf clubs all over the place. I think when it comes to recruiting apprentices, it's just really important that people follow the correct processes. So that there's a website called Recruiting Apprentice. So as an organisation, you can advertise your vacancies on that website. It's a government-funded website, and that's where all young people in schools are told to look for apprenticeships. So quite often employers will literally just post a vacancy on their website, but not post it on that website. Then how do you find it? I know we've recently done some recruitment. You mentioned Tottenham. I know 2 years ago they recruited 3 apprentices with us, and I think there were around about 230 applications for those 3 positions. So young people are out there. You've sometimes just got to persevere in terms of your sort of fishing exercise to try and find them. In terms of schools, as a college, I think we probably go into around about 300 schools in the north of England, and that'll be the same for other colleges elsewhere in the country. Obviously, you promote the programmes that you deliver. So for MISCO, we're a land-based college, so we are going in talking about sports turf, talking about greenkeeping, talking about horticulture, arboriculture, agriculture, all the sort of land-based subjects. I think what we need perhaps are sort of more role models, more case studies, more videos that are perhaps a little bit more relevant to some of the ones that we've maybe had in the past. I know Schools into Stadia, we did that event in Liverpool. We did actually take on an apprentice from that event who I think went to Tranmere, if I remember correctly, somebody that attended that event from a school. So those events are brilliant because you're actually showing the young people that it's not just cutting grass, because that's the perception, that's what they think. We're talking about the science, we're bringing in the STEM element. Nowadays we're talking about lighting technology, battery technology. We're entering a different sort of a different arena, if you like, in terms of training. What we've also got coming in a year's time is T-levels. So education has been reformed again. So we've previously had sort of GCSEs, A-levels, and then vocational education. So they're now calling them technical levels, T levels. So there will be an environmental T level, and that will have a mandatory work placement element to it. So that should help, because what that'll mean is if you get in touch with your local school, your local college, you should be able to have some people on placement during that final year of their education to hopefully inspire them to take up a career in sports turf. So, but it is hard to recruit. It's hard for us as well as a college. I mean, we're trying to find a tutor at the moment in the south, and we're really struggling. But obviously, we get increased numbers of learners, and then we need more tutors. So it's a bit like a sort of double-edged sword. But yeah, some really healthy debate.
Guys,
Yeah, I mean, we spoke about this last year, to be fair, and just remind me, and this is where it probably comes down. You know, it's great we've got people apply for apprentices, but when you have, say, 230 for 3, take out 150 of them because they're just fans of the club and want to be there, then you've got another 30 that drop out, but you could still have another 20 or 30 that you lose, and I assume they go and do another course. They don't do ground sports turf. They will choose something else because they haven't got that job. And that's where I think we miss a trick as well, where you think, well, if you've got 20 people that are really keen, but there's only 3 jobs, get 17 people on a course that they can do online. Let's get together and get where they live. Let's get that experience with them. They're doing a full-time course. Inputs from people like myself or us for the panel, for example, could be them for 3 months, giving them their experience or depending on where they live. And all of a sudden, you've got 17 new people that have come into that industry, where you've then got 3 people that come into it and you've lost 227, but you haven't because there's a lot of time wasters there. But that's where I think we need to evolve as colleges, not just MySco, BCA in the same way, down the road, Merriswood. You know, we need to be thinking outside that box. How can we still run a course that's viable for the college? Because let's be honest, that's what it comes down to, whether it's viable enough and how much money they're going to make. But to get people in, because at the same time, we're just losing the momentum and losing them kids. Or not even kids, it could be young adults, it could be a little bit older, but that's where I think we need to focus a bit more on, because it's great when you hear good numbers. It sounds lovely. 220, 230 people sounds absolutely fantastic. But when it's only 3 people that can get a job, we're still losing a hell of a lot of people. And I'm sure you're at any college like that. There's probably quite a few like that. But it just, for me, that's where just momentum's lost. As soon as why someone's keen and they're engaged, we need to keep them. As soon as you lose that engagement from them, that's it. They're going to become a mechanic or a plumber or electrician or chef. You know, and that's it. They're not coming back in.
I mean, engineering is interesting because there's an enormous skills shortage, and you mentioned salaries. One of the schemes we do is railway engineering. 3-year programme, £40,000 salary after 3 years as a new entrant into the engineering industry. So it's difficult to compete with those type of sectors.
And that's what I said earlier. Our sector has to realise where we are in terms of the pigeons of where everything else is. So this is what we pay, and people understand that. I do think there's youngsters that leave college or school and just think they should be on 50 grand a year as soon as they leave. Well, welcome to the real world. That isn't the case at all, you know. But I do think, you know, for our little bubble, well, maybe that's where the structures come in. But it's difficult when we're trying to judge ourselves against other specific areas.
The other thing that some employers do is they kind of pool their vacancies. So you might have, 4 football clubs in London who will run a joint recruitment. We're looking for apprentices in sports turf. Come and talk to us, host an event. There's all sorts of sort of more creative things you can do, I think, if you're trying, like as you say, just to get young people into the industry rather than fighting over, well, I want that one, I want that one, I want that one. I know John at sort of Leicester City, he's got sort of quite a large number of apprentices there at the moment. And again, doesn't seem to struggle in terms of recruiting, but probably because perseverance in that sort of recruitment phase.
I think Neil had a question, didn't you? You just pass it forward.
I've had the experience of trying to get into local schools. When my daughter was at secondary school, went and spoke there, and that was just really difficult. Firstly, to get through the door and get in and say this is what I do, and there is such a job as a groundsman. We've done apprenticeships on gardens and grounds where I worked at Hurlingham before, and some of them have gone through, and now one of them's my tennis supervisor, which is great. Started off as an apprentice, to with the IOG, and that's the perfect sort of scenario, if you like. But that's few and far between. And when I wanted to rekindle it, we were looking for staff, and we ended up, I thought, right, we'll go down the apprentice road because we couldn't fill the vacancy like a lot of us can't. And when I went into that and looking at where we could do a groundsmanship apprenticeship as opposed to a greenkeeping one, we ended up coming out to BCA, which, funny enough, where I went in the 80s, started off and doing, you know, and having a conversation with them. But then, and it just amazed me. I'm sort of almost central London. We're in Fulham, and that was the nearest place, nearest college. And I think it links up with what, you know, the IG can do. Is, you know, is pushing that and speaking to government, and that funding that's been withdrawn and withdrawn. And lots of our colleges, they're on a shoestring, they haven't got the money. From certainly when I went there, it was really up and coming. They were looking to build the golf stuff, which they've now done, and that. And I know they've got a lot of greenkeeping apprenticeships there. I think they've got some guys doing groundsmanship, maybe from Reading and local football clubs, but they really struggle. And talking to them, and Emma there, trying to get it set up with us, which we've now got that in place, and we're interviewing for apprentices at the moment. But I think, as you say, it's not. There's no one silver bullet for it. I think we've got to go and kick down all these doorways in lots of different places and keep pushing. But certainly looking at government and getting funding into colleges and trying to get places more local. Because Merriswood, I was shocked when I went there because I knew you used to do it, but I went there and they're only doing the golf greenkeeping sort of apprenticeship. So let's say having to travel out, we've got a 16-year-old or even an 18-year-old say, right, you've got to travel from Fulham and get yourself basically out to Maidenhead, which might be only half a dozen times a year, but even so, if they don't drive, which a lot of kids now don't, and blah, blah, blah. So it just makes there's those sort of things to overcome. But I think we've got to keep, as you say, looking at different avenues and thinking outside the box, definitely.
Okay.
I think the online training courses are great, but I've still got friends from when I done my level 1, level 2, you know, from sitting in a college classroom discussing, you know, different experiences, different points, you know, whether the colleges could group together. So as you're doing your online courses, but you've maybe got 30 students in an area, to then the colleges collaborate together to get the 30 students into you know, a stadium or a golf course or you know, a room just for a one-day Q&A as part of their course. I think you'd get so much more out the student at the end of it.